Hi everyone, this is Melissa, the Stamp Doc, and we are live on Facebook on May 29th, 2019. Today I'm going to share with you how I did this card, and I used a technique on this called No Line Watercoloring, and there's also some heat embossing on that as well. So let me show you the stamp set that this is from. This is from a stamp set called Bloom and Grow, and this will be available on June 4th. And as you can see, it's got several of the little floral sprays, and then it's also got some great little greetings as well. So you can make a wide array of cards with that. With each one of the flower sprays, there's also coordinating dies, so you have a wide assortment of those, and you can cut those out perfectly as well. So this is one of my favorite bundles from the new catalog, and I've made several cards with that. So I've shared a few of those on my blog and Instagram and Facebook. If you've missed those, I'm going to run through them really quickly. Here is the one I shared earlier today, and if you want to know how I did this, I did 2 videos for this card, and those are on my YouTube channel and also on my blog right now. Hi, Patricia. This one I shared about a week ago, and just did the little flower spray. This is one of my favorite stamps to use, and it is called Artisan Textures, and it just really adds a nice texture to it. And then I also used the basket weave embossing folder on the back too. I shared this one earlier this week, and I just love the rich colors on this. I did Stampin' Blends to color this one. And then this is that splatter that goes through there. That is that same Artisan Texture stamp set. And so that's available now, and it's just one that I use all the time. And then I had posted that this is one that I had really goofed up. I had planned on doing this loose end and just really keeping it plain and simple. So I had no intention of adding this paper. And what happened is when I got the card completely finished, I smeared it up here and down here with black ink. So the only way I could really salvage the card was to add some pattern paper. So this is pattern paper from the Celebration Butterfly paper. I don't even remember what it's called, but I just had a few scraps laying around, and that helped me to salvage that. So today we're going to use the same stamp that I did on this one for the other card, but this time we're going to do what's called No Line Watercoloring. This one was done with the Stampin' Blends, and then I put Wink of Stella on over it. And I got a little heavy-handed with the Wink of Stella, so that's why that's kind of got a bit of a frosted look. I tend to like a lighter shimmer on that, but that's what that looks like. And I did pop that up with some dimensionals too. The loose edge that I did is very much like the video that I shared earlier today on the split layer card, and you're just doing that one single edge. So you can follow that same technique to create this look. All right, so I don't know how many of you have done this No Line watercolor, but for me, it was pretty intimidating. I don't really do a lot of artsy type stamping, and so when I did this card, I wasn't really even sure that I was happy with the results on it. So a lot of times when that happens, I will just set it aside, go to bed, and then when I wake up in the morning, I'll take a second look at it. And when I looked at it in the morning, I was like, that really doesn't look that bad, but I do think I could improve on it a little bit. And so I'm being a little brave showing this to you on a Facebook Live because it is a new technique for me and kind of out of my comfort zone. But at the same time, if I can do it, you can do it too. So I'm using watercolor paper for this technique. And I've got that right here, and I've cut that to 3 3/4 by 5 inches because that's what's going to fit. Now I'm going to put that paper on the piercing mat. If you are using any photopolymer stamps, so these are the stamps that have that are clear, that you can see through all the way. If you're using any of those, they don't have that rubber cushion that the red rubber does. And so sometimes you'll have your image not come out just exactly the way you want it. If that's happening to you, pick up one of these pads. I think they're only like $6 or $7 with your next order, and put that under your stamps, especially your photopolymer stamps while you're stamping, and you'll find that that will stamp quite a bit better. So when you go to stamp for this, you're going to want to use a light color. And so I am going to use Sahara Sand today, but you could use a gray, you could use, I've even seen people use like a light petal pink. So you could do just about any color that you want it to, but I am using Sahara Sand because it's a great neutral. But pick a neutral or a very light color, and you want to choose something lighter than what it is that you're actually going to color. So I'm going to open this one up. And I'm going to ink up my stamp. Get that evenly stamped there. And I'm going to stamp it off on the paper first, because when we stamp this, we want it to be very, very light on our watercolor paper. But I also chose the Sahara Sand because hopefully you'll be able to see it just a little bit better. And because the watercolor paper really picks up the ink, I'm holding that down for just a second before I lift it off. As you can see, I'm going to get that really close, but you can see it's really very, very light on there, okay? But that's what we want, because we want those lines to just disappear and kind of meld into the middle. Now, anytime I do any coloring, I always sit for that. So I'm going to sit, which that also means I'm not going to be able to see any comments, but I will check them all later. So just be patient with me. I'm going to use our re-inkers. And so the main color I'm using is Poppy Parade. Now, anytime I buy one of our ink pads, I always buy a refill. You just never know when a certain pad you're going to use it a lot. So if you make like 20 or 30 cards and you've kept your pad open all day, you may want to refresh it. And so really just this extra $3, $4 for your ink refill is well worth it if you go ahead and purchase that at the time that you buy your pad. But if you don't have the re-inkers, you can also just gently squeeze the lid down to the pad, and then that will pull a tiny bit of ink onto the lid that you can pick up also. So you can do it that way too, but there's just a tiny bit of give there. You just give it a little push, and then you can use that as your palette. What I've been using recently is my block. So I find that this size block, so the same one that I use for stamping, is perfect for my watercoloring. So I just use this as my palette and go from there. So we're going to lay that down, and I'm going to put just a couple of drops of the Poppy Parade on there. And I am using aqua painters. These come in packages of 2. And it looks like I've been using this one with some green, so I'm going to just kind of make sure I've got that all out of there. You just really want to run your water through that. All right. And if you just give it a little squeeze, that's just tap water, so you don't have to do anything really fancy with it. But I'm just going to color this little petal right here. And I'm adding a little bit of water, but not a ton. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same over on this one. So I'm just adding a little water, and then I'm going to kind of thin that Poppy Parade dot out a little bit. And we're just going to let that kind of fill in up to the lines there. Now, this is one of those things where you're going to have to do a couple of coats. You don't want to just do this in one fell swoop. So be prepared to go back a couple of times on this. So I'm going to get that on there good. And you'll see that it will lighten with time. You can also just kind of clear your brush and move that color around too. I'm going to come in here. And I like to let those dry in between. So then I can always go back and add more. But if you really want that variation in color, you kind of want to give it a chance to dry in between. So I'm looking for kind of the darker areas on some of these where the petals overlap. And if I want a little more water, I'm going to add that out. So I'm going to go ahead and color there. And I'm going to get some up here to get some lighter petals going. And yeah, we'll just add a little bit of color to that. And to this one. And I'm going to go in some of these darker areas again too. Any place where those petals are going to meet up, I tend to go a little bit darker. So I know it's probably a little hard to see, but once we get it all, it will come together. So do a little more water on this petal. But again, I'm kind of going every other petal at this point because I want those to have a little bit of time to dry before I go in and do more. And I can get kind of that variation there too. And any place I can do dark, I'm just going straight in and doing that. So the new catalog, let's just kind of talk about that as I'm going with these. The new catalog is going to launch on Tuesday next week. If you haven't gotten a copy and you're local, feel free to stop by my office. I've got copies there. All you have to do is just ask Lisa at the front and she'll get you a copy. You just have to sign for it so that I know you received one. And if you're not local, I just ask that you pay shipping on those because they're a bigger book and there's really no cheap way to send it. I do send them priority mail, so you'll get it within about 3 to 4 days. But I do need you to pay just the shipping charge on that. So that's, if I invoice you through PayPal, I generally charge you $8 for shipping and handling on that. But the catalog itself would be free to you. So if you're interested in that, just send me a message on Facebook or send me an email and I'll be happy to get one in the mail to you. And you would even have it before it goes live on Tuesday. So that would be a good deal. I'm going to come in and do this little petal down here that's going to be darker. And I think I can kind of come in here too. So yeah, just if you do every other one, you're going to get a little bit more variation. And your color's just not the same every single time you go on there. So yeah, if you try this technique, I would love to see what you come up with. And I by no means consider myself an artist here. This is kind of new territory for me also. And let's come back over here. Let's see if we can get this little guy wet, and maybe up here we'll get it wet a little bit. Yeah, this was kind of a hard choice for the Facebook Live, but thought you guys might like to see how this stamp set kind of comes together, because it really is a very beautiful stamp set. I kind of come in this one and get it going, but as you can see, it gets really fuzzy looking, but you do start seeing those petals kind of come to life. And let's come in here, get a little bit darker going. But yeah, you can really control that color quite a bit. I do like coloring these with the blends quite a bit though. They tend to really give me that variation in color. If you've got Copics, those are very similar also. Will give you kind of that similar look. You can even do the No Line with your Copics too. I found a video on that today that I was kind of impressed with, and thought that might be a good thing to try with the blends also. So now I'm just kind of getting in there a little bit more. And if you notice, there's all these little empty spaces in there. Well, that's where the next color is going to go. So, and again, when I did this last night, I was like, boy, this does not look good. And then I had to kind of sleep on it to see that it actually didn't look too bad. So don't be harsh on yourself if you don't think yours is looking quite the way it should. It may actually be turning out better than you think. All right, I'm going to kind of come in there and do that one too. Okay, so we're going to get just a little bit darker in that one, and I'm going to go a little darker over here. Okay. All right, so again, I know it looks kind of funny, but that's really where I want that to go until that dries. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the centers of the flower. And for that one, I am using Mango Melody. And this is almost like a really bright yellow, but also kind of a bright orange. I'm going to kind of put a little bit of water in the centers here because I do kind of want it to blend in with the red too. So that was Poppy Parade, and now we're just going to kind of toss in some of this. And I just kind of pat it in. I don't even really do much more than that. So if you comment or share or like this video, I am going to send this card to one lucky person. So I guess if it does turn out to be a nightmare card, too bad, maybe nobody will want it. I'm going to go back in and do just a little squiggles on my outside here. Yeah, flower just needed a little more definition, but you can really kind of see most of my lines have disappeared, and we've really gotten this watercolor effect with those. So the next thing I'm going to do is my Granny Apple Green. And what's great about using the acrylic block is after I'm done, I just rinse this off in the sink and it's perfectly clear. So that makes it really nice. And I like using the aqua painter because I really don't have to worry too much about the colors there. So I'm just going to go in and kind of trace these leaves out. And we'll keep doing that. And so it probably looks like I'm painting, but I am actually following the lines in this. And then I generally will go back in with a little bit darker color to get more definition there. Pick up a little bit more, kind of go in there, and just get that going. And got a few more here. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect, guys. So, I mean, I definitely don't think I'm a pro at painting or watercolors, but if I can do this, so can you. Okay, so I've got my leaves on there, and then I'm going to do just a little bit more of that mango, and I'm going to come in and do some of these little round bits. I'm not really sure what those are, but they're part of that floral spray. And again, not making anything up. These are here on that. And all right. There we go. All right, I'll show you a little bit close up on that. Not exactly gorgeous, but really not too bad, right? Okay, so My final step on this card, as far as the coloring, I'll show in a minute. I'm going to give that just a second to dry. And we'll go ahead and do the base of the card. So there's our finished card. I'm going to lay it over here. And let me just show you what else you need to cut to finish this card. So I have, for my card base, a piece of Poppy Parade cardstock. It is 4 1/4 by 11 inches long, and 5 1/2 inches is where it's scored. So this will make a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card. And then I have a 4 inch by 5 1/4 inch piece of basic black cardstock. And we're just going to adhere that on there with some snail adhesive. And add that to there. Okay, so that's our card base. Now for the greeting on that, I actually used some heat embossing. So I don't want to do heat embossing on a live because it's kind of loud when you use that, but I am going to show you my technique for doing that. Right here I have a piece of basic black cardstock, kind of hard to see against the contrast, but again, I've got that paper piercing pad underneath there because I do want to get a good image with it. And I always use Versamark for my embossing. I just find that that gives you the best images. So I am using the stamp that says "You are simply wonderful," and I'm going to ink that up with the Versamark ink. We're going to line that up on there, stamp that down. And then always close up your Versamark right after you do that, because now the powder's going to fly. So I still have one of my little stamping trays. I really wish Stampin' Up! Still carried these. They come in so handy. But if you don't have one of these, don't worry. You don't have to have one. I've seen a lot of people that use the little plastic Glad containers, like the little Tupperware containers. Something like that will work perfectly for this. So you're just going to sprinkle on. This is white embossing powder, and you can get embossing powder in different colors, and there's even some shimmer ones coming out in the new catalog. So I'll be excited to try some of those. But I just really love the way the white shows up on the black. Now, the biggest mistake I see most people make with heat embossing is they don't get it heated all the way through. So you're going to use a heat tool. This is our heat tool, and it is perfect for that. It has 2 settings. I find that to get the best results, putting it all the way at the maximum works best. You do not want to use a hairdryer because that's just going to push that powder around. It's not going to actually melt it. We want to melt it. Back before I even started as a demonstrator, I had people tell me that they would do this over like their gas stove or a gas flame. I don't really recommend that. So really investing in a heat tool is great, and that will give you what you need to melt that. So what most people mistake is it has almost a powdery look when it's still dry. And then it develops a shiny look once it is melted fully. So you want to make sure all of it's shiny. I know when I do it in classes, a lot of times people get in such a hurry that they don't melt it fully, or they'll have areas that aren't fully melted. You really just want to watch it as you're heating it, make sure everything kind of goes clear and shiny. And then you don't want to overheat it either, because that can actually burn it, and that will give it more of a dull appearance. So heat embossing is pretty easy to do, but there are ways to mess it up. So, just be careful, get it to that shiny stage, and then you're done. So we will set that aside, and we're probably ready to do the final little wash on this card. So I am going to get my aqua painter ready here. And let me do that. And I'm going to turn it upside down. That's just a little bit easier. And I am using Balmy Blue. And what I want to do here is I want to make this really light. And I want to do kind of a quick wash over the top part of the card, just to add that accent in there. So I really made sure most of that other was dry. And now I just want to go in and get it wet all around the image, but I don't want it to bleed out too much. So that's kind of the tricky part of that. So I'm gonna really try to get this pretty light on here. And we're just gonna kind of come in and give that a little sky wash to it. If it bleeds together, that's really okay. It's not gonna hurt anything, and it just really adds to that watercolor effect. So we're gonna get that all in there. And just about. And then I just kind of touch in some of these other areas too. So yeah, it's one of those, you really can't be too perfect on this. In fact, the less perfection you try, the better it turns out. Okay, so I've got my little sky wash on there too. So we're gonna try to let that dry. I'm gonna pat it with my paper towel just to speed that along a little bit, just for the sake of video. And again, like I said, the block, you can just wipe that clean, rinse it under your sink, and it is ready to go. So it really does make, you don't need any special tools other than what you've already got to do this with. So yeah, there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and put snail on the back of this. Now, because it's very wet, I am incredibly generous with my snail adhesive on these. I'm going to add that to the front of the card. There we go. And then for the little greeting, I'm going to add that with a couple of dimensionals. And I always believe you should use as many dimensionals as possible. You don't want your card falling apart. So even on this little strip, I'm using 5. They're not that expensive. Don't be cheap on your cards. You're making nice cards. Don't start chinsing out on the dimensionals. That gets you yelled at in class. All right, and I just want that to go right underneath there. And I think that's about it. I want to get it straight there. All right, perfect. All right, and there is our finished card. So really didn't take too long, but that is that No Line Watercolor. I encourage you to give it a try. Like I said, it's one of those that's not a perfectionist technique, but give it a try and try not to be too hard on yourself. So thanks so much for watching. Next Wednesday, I won't be on live at 8:30, so I'm going to have to move it to Monday, and we'll kind of do a sneak peek of the new catalog. If you are not on my mailing list, be sure you get on that by going to my blog, which is thestampdoc.com, and sign up for my mailing list, and that way you'll be notified when I go live. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you guys have a great week. Bye.